years old. If those structures are not established and those things are well entrenched, we could run into problems. So we do documentation and seek the approval of the National Pension Commission. Once those approvals are granted, then we make payments to the bank accounts of the beneficiaries. I'm using the word beneficiaries here because in some cases, those beneficiaries are actually not the RSA holder, particularly when the death has occurred. So it is to the estate of the RSA holder heirs. Now that is the RSA lifestyle. We'll break it down into the contribution process. Number one, we have client intake. So we do registrations and enrollments. And in this process, that is how over the last 14 years, we have been able to register about 9 million customers. You would hear that the National Pension Commission has introduced the enhanced contribution registration system. And it is all about sanitizing that data to ensure that personal identification number of the customer, and probably the details of how the contributions are going to be made. Now those, like I said earlier, that employee will now submit those details to their employer. A number of us, because our experiences over time have shown that the employees sometimes will try to write the numbers on a piece of paper as the enrollment starts. With the public sector, federal and states, after due documentations have been made, and that sometimes takes some time, and things like that, beyond even the challenges that I've mentioned at the end of the paper, while sometimes you have some budgetary constraints or appropriations not made. The PFC, upon receipt of this money, will now notify us as PFAs, and we will credit each and every RSA that we have. The essence of that is that so that we can become accountable to the contributors. We will give them periodic statements, and they will see what has accumulated in their account, and they will also be able to now make informed decisions about whether they would like to increase the payout that they have when they retire by doing things like voluntary contributions. Those monies are processed with the accompanying schedules, like I said, and then the PFA is also crediting those accounts. After crediting the employee's RSA, we now make the investment decisions and we advise the PFC. So this is where I'm talking about those controls. And the PFC will now invest those monies in accordance with our instructions, provided they are in tandem with the regulations issued, the guidelines issued by the National Pension Commission. Now this is a cycle that goes on and on and on for months and months. And with the introduction of the micro-pension, this takes place more or less on a daily basis. So as soon as enough pools of funds have been obtained, we take those investment decisions, we advise the PFC invests the money, we monitor the performance of those investments, and so on and so forth. Now this is the investment side. Number one is to ensure that the pool of funds credited to retirement savings accounts of contributors is moved into the investment account. Because you cannot invest what you don't have. You can't invest what you don't have. So we make sure that there is an investment account that receives the pool of those funds. And it's from those funds that we make the investment decisions. Number two is that we say that the investment departments, all of us are required by regulation to have investment departments. They make thorough analysis of products, like emphasized by the President when she made her speech, bankable products, so that there are no stories to the RSA holders at the end of the day. Those products must stand the test of the guidelines. And beyond the guidelines, even within our various PFAs, we have policies that also support our investment decisions. Then the PFC executes those instructions, like I said earlier, by investing those monies. So if, for instance, we have today decided that we are going to buy federal government bonds, and we advise the PFC will ensure that they purchase those federal government bonds and advise us. If today we decide we are investing in money market instruments, the PFC is advised, and they are giving details about the yield, the tenor, and so on and so forth, the maturity, which account, because those monies will have to be accounted for at the end of the day. We are required by regulation to carry out what we say is valuation on a daily basis. With the introduction of the multi-fund structure in July 2018, those accounts grew, the public accounts grew from 2 to 4 in number. Now we have 6, 5 are operational. We are looking into the ethical fund, and I believe a lot of work is being done. In addition to the above steps, the PFAs monitor the performance of those investments on an ongoing basis. You would agree with me that the economy is not stagnant. The economy is very dynamic. So while we believe that we are going to create value for the contributors, we take certain decisions to increase the value of their funds, which means increasing what they access when they do retire. Probably at this point is the right point to make the distinction that pension funds management does not in any way replace social security. There is a misconception that we should use pension funds to provide social security. Our number one responsibility is to the contributor. The President emphasized no stories when they do retire. Yes, we will have other responsibilities along the way, helping national development infrastructure and so on and so forth. But we have to ensure that those funds will ultimately come back and they will be used for the benefit of the contributors. We have a number of factors that we take into consideration. Economic factors, the inflation rate today, the available instruments, and so on and so forth. SARS, believe you me, as PFAs, as operators in this industry, and as being encouraged by our regulators, we are very much interested in infrastructure development. But like I said, we cannot tell stories to our contributors at the end of the day. So those infrastructure development must be there, and they must be seen to be able to sustain and to provide value, positive value to the contributors. You cannot take ₦1 of a contributor today, and in 15 years or 30 years, when the same person is retired, and give that person ₦1 and think that you're giving that person value. Sorry, it's also important that I stress this point. When we carry out these investment activities, we make what we call investment gains. These gains are credited into the RSA's account of the individual account holders. There is a misperception that we take whatever we want and we give the RSA holders what we want to give them. So that is very, very far from the truth. All the gains are credited to the account of the RSA holders. And at the end of the month, we send our invoice to our regulators, who, dependent on what kind of scheme, if it is the RSA, they look at this, they assume the responsibility for the RSA holders, look at the invoice we send, and approve the fees. Even that is on a provisional basis, because they do come to our PFAs and conduct examinations to confirm that the situations we have mentioned are the true situations, and the fees we have taken is what is rightfully due to us. There are other institutional investors that are called approved existing schemes. The word approved is given to them because they have to be approved by the National Pension Commission. And it is important maybe to state that the PRA 2014, just like the predecessor PRA, says that the monthly pension, this pension, is the minimum that the employers can provide. So if employers can afford to give extra and they believe in the welfare of their employees, they can also establish some schemes, but they have to do that, and we obtain approvals from the National Pension Commission, so that whatever agreements we enter into them, particularly in the service level agreements, on the fees and things like that, the investment vehicles will be monitored by the National Pension Commission. The withdrawal process, which usually is the third leg and the last leg of this scheme, starts with the employee making a demand on the PFA. In the absence of an employee, when there's a death, then the heirs, if I'm not mistaken, probably the investment gains over the years have probably even outpaced the rate of contribution. It is an anomaly. It is an anomaly. And maybe some of the reasons for that is that today, the biggest employer of labor, the federal government, is still paying contributions at the rate of 15% total, rather than 18% total. Yes, we do appreciate that there are budgetary constraints, but there were serious computations that were made to make a recommendation for the increase from 15 to 18%. If those things are thrown away, we will put more people in peril at the point of retirement. So, sir, we will call on you to support our regulators in ensuring that there are adequate budgetary provisions and appropriations in time to ensure that people retire and they retire in comfort. We do this today and send this documentation and request to the regulator through what we call the ALMAS system. It's an electronic system that will render our request for withdrawals. This emphasizes the need why each and every house must invest in adequate technology. We do that even for the purposes of servicing our customers. You will agree with me that 9 million customers, it will be very difficult for 22 PFAs to have the manpower to approach them one-on-one. So just like our elder brothers, the banking industry that is about 126 years to be or thereabout, use technology in terms of enrollment, in terms of servicing the customers, in terms of communicating with them, managing them, and so on and so forth. We also embrace and invest in technology. Approval, once obtained, is processed and payment made to bank accounts. We don't make over-the-counter payments. We don't, sir. It is important for transparency, and it's also important for accountability. We make payments to the bank account of the beneficiaries. In this case, the beneficiaries for 25% M-Block, lump sum and program withdrawal are usually their own bank accounts, where they decide to purchase annuity at the point of retirement or even after retirement. It is made payments and made to the insurance funds who open accounts with the 4 pension custodians. This has been put in place to ensure that those monies do not disappear. Because the regulators believe that whatever pension assets have been gathered, they have a responsibility to retirees. So there is ongoing collaboration with NICOM in terms of regulation and things like that. But I would think that if the situation permits, that these 2 committees also interfere interface with the committees that are in charge of insurance to ensure that there is a stronger system in place. Money is sent to the bank account of the beneficiary by the pension fund custodians. Because the monies are actually resident with the pension fund custodians, the PFS will only give instructions. And those instructions will be respected by the PFCs, provided they are legitimate instructions. I will spend some time to talk about the types of benefit payments we do have today. The first is normal retirement. That is the most common that we do have, even though maybe the 25% is getting to be very common now because of the state of the economy. Many people are losing their jobs. But the normal retirement for public sector, MBAs, and private sector, when the FDM bonds are released, the templates are generated for beneficiaries. For the private sector, one complete contribution is confirmed. So what we do is we also get right to the employers to tell us that they have limited everything in favor of the employee. Because the last thing you want is to have some monies left behind that are due to retirees. And as soon as we do that, we raise and effect payment to the retirees after the necessary approvals. Then we have annuity. This is the twin sister of the program withdrawal. It is run by insurance companies. So people who desire, rather than have the monthly program withdrawals that we administer on a monthly basis or even on a quarterly basis, will opt to buy an annuity. And that amount, those annuity amounts will be paid by the insurance companies on the periodic basis that has been approved by the National Pension Commission. Then we have the temporary loss of job, M-Block, NSITF, payment to foreigners, and voluntary contributions. You will recall I said the state of the economy is so bad that we have more people losing their jobs today because they believe that they have monies that they have saved. The regulators have allowed that they can access 25% of their RSA balance only once in their lifetime. So an RSA holder will not access 25% today and come back tomorrow and say that he's lost his second job and try to access another 25%. All these things are put in place to ensure that these monies are actually used for pensions. M-Block is for people who have not saved enough money to be able to purchase any reasonable program withdrawal pension. So the balance today, if you have a balance of less than 550,000, you are paying M-Block at one go, and things like that. Death benefits, these are paid to heirs, people will call next of kin, after proper documentation. These documentations will include things like death certificates from the hospitals, police report confirming the death of the customers. We also do due diligence. So we really do confirm as much as possible that the account holder is deceased before we effect payment of death benefits to their next of kin. I've said a little bit about the micro pension plan. To a large extent, it differs just slightly from the formal sector. In this case, the owner of the account is actually the employer, is the employee and the employer. So he or she decides to make contributions at the time that they believe that they can make those contributions. Now, those contributions are segregated into two. 40% is for contingent withdrawal, which means they can access the money on demand, and 60% is to fund retirement benefits. This flexibility has been put in place taking into consideration the larger population that will be covered by this scheme. they would want to have some assurances that they can get the monies to probably meet certain needs, increase, make more investments into their business, and so on and so forth. But it is also important that because they are making the investments for pension, that 60% of it is kept to fund retirement benefits. Maybe rather than the title, beyond the RSA cycle, I think it is in support of the RSA cycle. As PFAs, we do provide certain services. We are required by regulation to issue quarterly statements. A number of us have gone beyond that today. Some people issue monthly statements. And beyond that, our RSA holders have access through our internet platforms to view their accounts and generate and print out their own statements. They also are at liberty to visit any of our offices and demand for those statements. We issue out SMS notifications for all the transactions that we receive. So just like the bank notifications, once we credit an RSA, we tell our customers the amount that has been received and credited into their RSAs. We organize customer forum and pre-retirement forum. This is to be able to interact with our various customers, appreciate some of their challenges, and in fact take on board some of their needs. Those are the kind of things that lead to some of the innovations that have happened in the industry in the last 14 years. It is also a veritable avenue to be able to listen to concerns and address issues. Because pension is not to say transaction-based like banking industry, where the individual will make credits and withdrawals on a daily basis. This means of forum is also available to customers to understand the workings of pensions, to educate them, and to also probably convince them that the savings that they can do today will materialize into future benefits for them. We provide customer service, like I said, via our branches, online, and call centers. Our web services are always up 24/7 and available to people who are even outside the country. A number of paper presenters, ranging from the president of PENOPS to the paper of the acting DG and the trustees, have discussed a number of challenges. But I think, I'm not trying to bore you, sir, but it is important that we look at those challenges once more. We have increased job losses due to increase in number of people accessing 25%, and this is leading to, so it is about the economy, and things like that. These are challenges, because, you access temporarily 25% of your RSA balance after a period of 4 months of no job. What happens in month 5? What happens in month 6? What happens in month 7? So I think, based on the larger responsibilities of particularly the Senate Committee, that is establishment and public service, we have to look at the welfare of employees, putting in place a social security program. We have backlogs of payments. The last time accrued rights were paid was up to November 2018. This is December 2019. What this means is that people who have retired from that day on are not on a pension plan. They are not on a pension plan. Now, the fear of this, I may be wrong, it is also not an excuse. is probably what leads some people to do certain things while they're in active service. They find ways of accumulating monies that do not belong to them. Sir, we need your help here. Our regulators need your help here. They do what is required of them, do the computations, and provide to the budget office. If this amounts, if the budgetary provision is not enough, by even 1 kobo, it means someone will suffer. Just 1 kobo, it means somebody will be shortchanged 1 kobo. And that person will not be paid on time. I dread to think what will happen to me if I will retire today and I don't have a pension the next month. Please, sirs, this is an area that requires a lot of assistance from the National Assembly. In terms of making adequate budgetary provision, in terms of ensuring appropriation, and in terms of monitoring the executive to ensure that they abide by this. State governments. A number of the state governments are still not compliant. Some states have not even contemplated putting in place the law, the enabling law. And some of these states employ as many as 30,000, 15,000, 16,000 workers. Many of us seated in this room, do not just earn our daily living for just ourselves. So if you consider the multiplier effect of 30,000 in a community, of 60,000 in a community, it is huge. I don't know for other people in this room, but it is almost certain that once it is around the 18th of the month, to about the end of the month, on a daily basis, I will receive text messages from families and friends asking me to come to their aid. And I know it is much, much more for people who are in public service like yourself. Those text messages, 80% of the time, are coming from people who today are employed. We have a crisis on our hands. And the more we have this kind of settings to try to find solutions to these issues, the better for us. We will probably be able to reduce the incidences of kidnapping business, terrorism, drugs that are being peddled everywhere, and so on and so forth. The state of the economy actually is no excuse for people to engage in those kind of things. But then, what have we done as a group of people is a question that we should ask ourselves. Inadequate and untimely release of funds by employers. So we see employers today who say that the business is not generating anything, they have not paid salaries, so how do they pay pensions? How do they make monthly pension contributions and things like that? Maybe the business environment probably has to be more conducive and understanding of the state of the economy. Maybe it is about enforcement. Probably, just like the tax authorities will go and will visit a business and see that the business is viable, is thriving, but has refused to pay tax, they will seal up the place. We probably need legislations like that. Because there are some employers that do not comply. The federal government itself, like I said, sir, is only contributing 15% as against the 18%. Yes, the additional 3% is a 20% increase, and I know it's a huge sum of money. But then when you consider the individuals who will retire and probably will find it difficult to even purchase medication for old age, then it is high time we sit down and put heads together and crack this difficult nut. So thank you very much, sir, for the paper. It is just to give a broad overview of the operations of the contributory pension scheme and throw up the challenges. Thank you very much.
Officials of PERA for putting on this wonderful outing, a retreat to carry us along and enlighten us on all matters pertaining to pension. We thank you for the wonderful preparation right from our arrival up to this moment. The very scholarly presentations are equally very commendable. Many of us who are very new to this exercise of pension operation are learning quite a lot. And as one of the definitions in education prescribed that education is a progressive discovery of ignorance. So, any day you discover what you were ignorant of, you become an educated person. And I'm sure I'm speaking the mind of very many of us in the National Assembly. And from the brief presentation, we are educated the more on the operations of the pension processes. Until now, many of us believe that it's just a question of money in, money out. And if we hear pensioners demonstrating on the streets, we say we wonder what all the billions and trillions of money they are kept and invested are waiting for, and allowing the pensioners to go on the street to demonstrate, particularly in the armed services. I used to say that it is criminal and very ungodly for any government to deny any pensioner his right. To take the best time of his life, 35 years of service or thereabout, 60 years in his life. After 60 years, even though I understand the UAE is saying 65 is too young, I can still believe I'm in the bracket of the youth. But after 60 years, you find that you've lost all the energy. Whatever you'll be given is just to manage the rest of your life. You're already in the extra time if you are in the soccer constituency. So we're all in the extra constituency, extra time of constituency. So ladies and gentlemen, the floor is open, and I'm sure the presenters will be very willing to answer our questions and our remarks, our observations. There is still room for improvement. And in our role as lawmakers, the first legislation was in 2004. 10 years after it was reviewed and improved upon, and I'm sure there is still many more areas that they have discovered that will require a lot of improvement. Let's take our notes, go back, examine those areas of improvement, and put us together after asking very vital questions, and particularly helping with the key challenges that the last speaker has identified. It's likely our own cup of tea to see how we can amend and improve upon the law, the act, and the pension law, so that we can make life better. One thing I want to share with my colleagues in the National Assembly, we'll discuss that later. I've just returned from Malaysia, from Malawi, and from the public service aspect, the National Assembly Service Commission took us to Malawi to discuss with the National Assembly Service Commission of Malawi. And it will be interesting to find that even all the legislators, in 193 parliament members, they are on pension. Because the whole idea is, one day, even if you come 10 times to the Legislative Assembly, you will be out of the assembly. And you find that you are not living up to anything. So they have packaged the same process. All National Assembly members have pension arrangements. And after that, apart from the severe gratuity, there is an arrangement. I and my counterpart from the House of Reps, Honorable Simon Bala, we were going to join CC after discussing with the leadership. Of course, I don't believe that you are taking over the duty already. So I find a lot of crisis. But it is likely from the outside. But this is for another day. I'm just preparing the minds of our colleagues in the National Assembly that when we see the package, we collected all the things. The whole idea is not allow any citizen to be miserable. You need to have something to live with. Let me allow my counterpart from the House of Reps to comment. Then we'll allow one member to make a contribution. Thank you. Excellency, the former Governor of Kano State and Chairman, Senate Committee of Public Service, other distinguished senators present, and distinguished colleagues, most especially my deputy, managers, and others, industry experience. The strong principle that retirees can determine the pensions as well do. Once again, thank you all for coming and I hope we are going to have a thank you. Distinguished honorable members, the floor is now available to you and somebody to talk their hand as we do in the class and identifying. Yes, please.
Members of the media, I just want to say that what the chairman meant was that we are going to join the contributory pension scheme. That we will be paying part of our income to buy into the contributory pension scheme so that the later doesn't report that we're asking for extra pension. Thank you. Yes, I don't want to have any contribution. Yes, thank you very much. Now I'll take a few notes on the presentations. Let me start with the last presentation, by the MD of the Premium Pensions, Mr. Mike. I actually appreciate the passion with which we spoke about the need for us to reduce 18%, 10 and 8%. What we still have is like 15% coming from the federal government, which we need to work on. But the first question I have is now that is talking about the federal government. And most times when you make reference to the issue of the bond, which was supposed to be paid for those who join the scheme and have benefits from the time of their first employment to the time of joining the contributory pension, you refer to the federal government. But there's a case on hand. A few days ago, I held a meeting with teachers in my state. Osun State joined the contributory pension scheme in 2010. There are this set of teachers who retired in 2016 who came to meet with me. Since 2016, when they retired, up till 2 days ago that they came to meet with me, they had not earned 1 kobo as pension. It was such an emotional scene, even meeting one of them whom I know very well, looking like an 80-year-old man. They had not received a penny. And the only reason was that the state government had not paid its share of the bond, which was supposed to be paid, calculated on the basis of the time the first appointment up to the point of joining the contribution. But the question, Madam, and the relevant PFs here is that since there is a provision in the law that allows even those people who go out of job to access a certain percentage of their contributions to the RSA, why is that not possible for those who retire and just because government have not paid their share of the bond could not access their money? Some of them are up to 2 million, 3 million the RSA. They need to buy drugs worth 10,000, 3,000. They can't afford it. So I don't know why it is impossible for them to also be able to access a certain percentage of what they have in the RSA. At least to meet those needs, that they have. That's one. Number two, there is also this issue that has become, very topical. Just yesterday I was discussing with some of our colleagues here, and we discovered that, and you made reference to it, that most states have not joined the contributory pension scheme. I believe, and I stand to be guided, that these are the infraction of the law, because the pension is on the exclusive legislative list. The National Assembly has made a law, which I believe all states ought to comply with. But as we speak, I don't know the number, but I'm sure that there are a lot of states that are not on the contributory pension scheme, which makes it's very difficult to have a uniform standard that we're using. What do you think can be done, to rectify this? You also spoke about the investment in foreign bonds and securities and foreign instruments, which requires the approval of Mr. President, if I get you very right, to get them. Why? Well, I wouldn't know whether there has been a request to the President which was declined by Pentagon. But the suggestion now is that maybe that power should be taken away from the President, to the board or any other authority. But unless we have an indication that there has been a request put forward, because if somebody has money that will be invested in foreign securities, which will bring in more returns and also grant greater stability in terms of the value, why not? But have you had instances, maybe the Pentagon person here can tell us where there has been a request made and the approval declined? And then lastly, so that I don't take too much of the time, the paper by Mr. M.K. Ahmad, delivered by Madam, is also a very strong one. And an issue I picked out of that, has to do with the issue of reservations about constant amendment of the law. We are representing the people. And of course, they are the ones who wear the shoes. The PFAs, the PFCs, the PENCOM, and even the National Assembly, we are the privileged ones. The ones we are representing are those ones who are at home who wear the shoes. So whenever they pick up issues on the things that are not right, this system may be working, yes, but I assure you, Madam, it's not working optimally yet. It's not even working at 20% to my own mind. I think there is a need. And there is not too much of amendment of the laws. If the laws are not serving the purpose they are meant to serve, this is 10 years after the law was enacted. 5 years now, 2004, 2019. I think whatever we have found as lacunas there, we need to fill them up. So I'm just thinking that to correct that impression, bringing up too many amendments. If there are issues raised by those who wear the shoes, we have a responsibility to them to see what we can do, tinkering with the laws to solve those issues. Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman, for the opportunity.
It's in two phases, Mr. Chairman. One, the pension funds just like the previous speaker talked about the foreign investment, securities and bonds that requires the president's approval. When we talk about investments local, which is not foreign, I think it's very categorical that timing should be of optimal importance, because we have a situation whereby the funds are not credited in the RSAs as at when due. That's a basic problem, because you see in the recent past, most of the protests we have on the streets from pensioners is locally unknown what can be done about it, because just like the earlier speaker said, it's the person that wears the shoe knows where it pinches him the most. Then secondly, I'm trying to be brief. Then secondly, I'm worried about the role VAT plays in the transactions when it comes to these funds. Of course, we know that by the nature of these funds, that the dividends that are payable on equity investments, they are tax exempt naturally. But the equity traded transactions, just like we heard the previous speakers talk about, they are also affected by VAT. And now, previously VAT was 5%, but now it's actually 7.5%. So I think we have to also, as stakeholders, look into that, Mr. Chairman, because as little as, or as minute as that might sound, these little differences actually mean a lot to the people on the grassroots. So that's the area I'd like to bring my attention to. Thank you very much.
Yes.
Represented that the investment options available to the pension funds administrators are: one, they must be bankable investments, and also that the administrators should shy away from telling stories to pensioners when it comes to having money spent to them. But we also note that projects or developments across the world are driven by this long-term source of financing, because safety of the pensions must always be a priority, agreed. But long-term development should be born out of leveraging from these resources that are long-term in nature. Because when you have funds that mature between 20 to 25 years, those are funds that should go into development of the country as against short-term investment options. But what do we see? We see investments only in money markets and to some extent short-term capital markets industries. I believe this is not good enough, and that is why probably the federal government at its sitting of the Federal Executive Council recently has directed that these issues be looked into and to find answers to some of these questions as to why we are not unleashing these trillions of naira that you have in abundance in this industry to be focused towards our rail lines, also to be focused into more productive and other developmental efforts of government. I believe a retreat such as this should discuss in earnest some of the recommendations that can be brought up for us to make progress. And having served until recently in one of the states, I would want to also comment as to why some state governments have not found it attractive to join the contributory pension scheme. I think as practitioners, we should also once more look at the costs associated with joining the contributory pension scheme. It does not only require a state to be fully covered under the group life insurance, which costs a fortune, in addition to other parties that the state bears. What it pays at contributory pensions and other associated costs also add to the cost of administering the contributory pension scheme as far as the state is concerned. So, in as much as we want to attract more states because they employ more, we should look at the law and especially what is required to bring these states on board, making the system more attractive. I think this will go a long way in ensuring that we have more numbers in terms of contributors to the scheme. The monitoring process, as explained also by one of the speakers, either from PENCO or NICO, when it comes to having annuity and the processes of the purchase of this annuity should be more expanded to the benefit of those of us seated here. And we can also have more sensitization towards ensuring that more people come on board on this scheme. And for those of us that are more with the rural people, talking to my friends seated here, David, I think we'll need to do more to have the informal sector, employers or employees come on board this scheme so as to improve on the numbers. So I thank you very much and hope that questions will go.
Let me take one more from this side.
From the National Assembly, House of Reps, and his deputy, my esteemed senators, my honorable colleagues. My name is Honorable Kabir Idris, member from Kano State. My questions is just about the previous speaker, the panel, who actually presented this wonderful paper for us also to be educated, because many of us from the committees, my colleagues can bear with me, we need to be educated on that so that we can be able to contribute our quota to the development of pensions in this country. My question actually goes to you. What are your plans? What plans or what measures do you take in educating the pensioners prior to their retirement age? That's one. Two, most of these pensioners or retirees are actually retired but not tired. Is there any consulting in respect of their area of specialization where you can be able to engage them after their retirement so that they can be able to contribute on those particular areas? I think this is also important that I mentioned earlier. They are retired but not tired, so they can be able also to contribute their quota to the development of the nation. And the final question is this issue of 25%. I retired from the service, or I can say I resigned from the service to join the politics, and I'm likely to be in the House today. But I can tell you today I have not benefited my 25%. Can you educate many of